Okay, so before we get into pitching, this session is to talk a little bit about narrative building, which some investors say is the most important part of having a successful pitch. So a human brain is designed to remember stories rather than facts. And one of the issues with pitching is that everybody goes through a slide and tells a lot of facts about the features of a product or like the market opportunity, and it's very data driven. And what you need to try and figure out how to do is weave it into a really compelling story. And we've spent a bit of time with actors and voice coaches and all people in that industry, and they've designed a way to kind of bring acting and storytelling as you would do if you were writing or performing in a play to a pitch deck. And so we've taken some of the best practice that we've heard from those sessions and put it together in order to share with you all. So by show of hands, how many of you know what a story arc is or have seen a story arc? I mean, I'm sure that a bunch of you have heard that there's only 7 different plots in the whole world. And there's only 7 different ways that you can tell a story. And there's, if you go for like Lord of the Rings or something, they manage to get all plots into one, which is why it becomes such a compelling story and why it's such a popular film. But essentially, you can use the story arc within your pitch as well. And all stories are formed of 3 basic things. So context, which makes you resonate with the characters and the situation they're in. Conflict, which helps you empathize with the character, and then a conclusion. And it's like everyone used to say, if it doesn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end, it's not a full story. And so it's exactly the same with how you tell your story of your business and the context that your customer is in and why it's important that you're resolving the problem that they're facing. So just like all good movies, books, and plays, you should be following this narrative whenever you're pitching your business. So the most important thing that people miss out is the context setting. So you have to say who the key players are in your story, which is your customers, and what situation they're in at the beginning. So you probably have seen people say when they're pitching their problem and solution, they'll start with their customer and they'll be like, they're looking for a solution to this problem. They've gone to XYZ place. Those different places, which are my competitors, didn't solve the problem in the right way. And then they found my product and then they used it. And that's kind of how you go through the narrative arc. So you set the context with your hero. Your hero is not yourself. Your hero is your customer in all stories. And your customer finding your product is the story that they go on. The conflict that they're facing is the fact that they've got this problem and they can't fix it at all in any other way, which is why your product is so important. So they encounter a problem that needs to be fixed. They look for different solutions, but they can't find anything. They find the perfect solution, which is your product. It turns out that that hero, your customer, is not alone. There are loads and loads and loads of people in a very similar situation. Not only do they have to go through their own story arc, all of these customers, but your original customer can be helpful to their story because they might be referring them or endorsing them or giving positive reviews. And then your hero is happy. That's the kind of resolution part of the story. With this being, but then they might become unhappy or they might lose engagement. And then what happens then? So it might be rather than just one arc, it might be just a constant stream of different arcs, but you must have the context, the conflict, and the conclusion. So the elements to remember are the characters. Your characters in your story are your customers and your business, essentially. And there might be other people like competitors. The conflict, which is the problem that you're addressing. The setting that this is all taking place in, so the world that your characters are living in, that's the market that you're operating in. So what the market conditions are like and what the customer pain points are. And then the resolution is how you solve their problem with your product. So if you want to see it in action, we've got these slides. We went through them the other day, and this is where you should be starting to tell your story arc within the slide deck. So the intro slides should always be about context setting, introducing your characters, introducing yourself and your business. The problem slide is obviously where you talk about the conflict. So that's the conflict that the customer is facing, and the pain point. And the idea here is that you really make the investor feel the pain of your customer one of the things that we always get on pitch deck is we don't really get why the problem is such a problem. And if you get them to feel it, if they're not a customer themselves, they won't necessarily have experienced the problem or understand the scale of the problem. So you really have to get them to feel it. The business model, go-to-market, market opportunity, that is all the context. So the market conditions that people are operating in. And then when you get to the end of your deck, that's going to the resolution of the problem. So how your solution works, why it's important, who else has this problem, and then you go on from there. So that's your kind of basic story arc within the slides. If you want to understand why you need to have this story arc, there's 3 questions that an investor is thinking when you're pitching them. Why should I care? Why should I believe you? And why should I join? Why should I get involved? Why should I be contributing to this pitch? And so the first couple of slides answers the why should I care? I should care because it's a huge problem and I really want to solve this problem with you. I understand the pain and I want to be a part of it. Everything in the middle is why I should believe that you're the right people to do it. It's a huge market. You've already got traction. The business model makes sense. Your go-to-market makes sense. So I believe that you're the right people to do it. And then the end is, why should I join you? You've got a killer team. Now's the right time. You're asking for the right amount of money. I know what you're spending it on. So the intro slide, we mentioned it a bit when we were going through the slide deck, the importance of the real estate on the intro slide. And we want to get that right. So if you do want to practice even just like your 1 sentence, you just want to talk through that 1 sentence description that you've got on your intro slide today, we're more than happy to provide some feedback for you. But the idea is that you use that intro slide for impact. You use it for a hook. So that 1 sentence description piques the interest of an investor within the first 3 seconds when they're looking at the slide. It's got a 1-liner on it, and that 1-liner is a bold vision. So rather than it being like really practical, we are going to do X for X group of people, it should be bold and visionary and talk about like where the business should be going overall. So an example of this is N26, the bank. They, on their deck, had the future of banking as their vision. It's obviously quite vague. It doesn't talk about exactly how they're going to do it, but it sets the investor up to be excited by what the future looks like. It's really short, really succinct, but you understand that it's probably a fintech product. So you've got the context that you need and a bold vision and a hook. Uber, next generation car service on their Uber cab first pitch deck. Dropbox, moving the world's files. So again, it's really simple, it's really succinct. It gives you an idea of what the business is doing, but in quite a visionary way. Automating healthcare delivery. And then bed and breakfast, this is probably the least visionary actually that I've come across, but book rooms with locals rather than hotels, which for the time when Airbnb was first out, nobody was doing stuff like this. So that's how the companies that you would have heard of used that valuable real estate on their initial opening slide when they were pitching for investment. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what you might be able to write on a similar slide. So if you are pitching this opening slide live and the investors are in the room and you just want to do that context setting piece, whilst you're talking to them, what you should be saying when you're on that slide is the big and urgent problem that you're solving, how you came across this problem and why it's so important to you to solve this problem. And then you can start getting into who it's a problem for, why it's a problem for them, how your solution addresses that problem. But when you're just in that initial thing, rather than being like, hi, I'm X, my company is Y, just start the storytelling straight away. As soon as you start talking about problem and why that problem is important to you, that gives them those early indications that you're the right person to start building this product, because you really understand the scale of the problem and what the problem is, and you care about it, which means you're going to want to work on this business for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years without giving up, because you're falling in love with the problem. And I'm sure you've heard this before. Everyone says you should be in love with the problem. You shouldn't be in love with your solution to the problem, because that might change and you might pivot over time. But if you're really obsessed with solving the problem, then you're never going to give up. And that's what investors want to see if they're going to invest into you. So I mentioned this a few times over the past couple of days, but traction dipping is an important part of narrative building and storytelling. So traction is all about building credibility. It's saying, this isn't just an idea. we've spoken to people, we've started to validate it, even if you're at the very earliest stages. So if you haven't got a product yet, you can still do traction dipping. That's okay. And you don't want to wait until the traction slide to start mentioning all the traction that you've got. A bit like someone said the other day, would you wait until the team slide to mention your team if you've got a killer team? No, you kind of mention it up front to get them excited, and then you mention it again at the end. So if you're looking at traction dipping in action, if we just pull out some of the slides, here's different points at which you can start talking about your traction before you get to the traction slide. So if you're talking about the problem, how many customers have you talked to about this problem? How urgent is the problem? Have you got a sample of 100 people that you spoke to and they all said, there is zero way that I can currently solve this problem, and it's so important to me that I solve this problem for XYZ reason? That will make the problem slides stand out so much more than if you just say, these people struggle with this thing, I think. Like, it's just a feeling that I have. You want to say, I've spoken to people, I know this information, I've got data around the problem, because that can be considered traction dipping. When you're talking about your solution, you might have some early adopters already, you might have some free users, you might have an LOI signed. So again, rather than waiting until the traction slide to mention any of that, if you're talking about your solution, how are your early adopters using this solution? Do you have a couple of free people that are giving you feedback right now? Mention that in those slides. And then similarly with go-to-market and the business model, which would all be before the traction slide, do you have any evidence to support why this strategy will be effective? And again, that all goes back to speaking to your users. You know that it should be this customer group because you've spoken to 50 people and they've all said this thing, so that's why you're starting with that group. So that's how you do traction dipping. You just keep mentioning little things, little crumbs of, I know what I'm talking about because I spoke to these people. I know what I'm talking about because I've looked at this data. I know what I'm talking about because I've got the right team, during all of the slides, and then you mention it again when you get to traction. And that's what Farhan was doing incredibly well when he was doing his intro to Sare on Tuesday morning. Let's just come back. Why? So just some final thoughts about storytelling. I don't know if you've ever heard of the dropped paper test. I'd actually never heard of it, and it really worked for me. So if you printed out your slide deck and you handed over all the pieces of paper to an investor, and the investor dropped all of the paper on the floor and you weren't there, would they be able to put your slide deck back together in the right order? Or would it just be a complete mess? If you've told the story in the right way on your slides, an investor should be able to pick up every individual piece of paper and put it all back in order, because your story makes that much sense when you look at the deck. And the way that you can do that is by using the title slides to your advantage. So you don't have to have problem, solution, total addressable market, competition as the title slides. Your opening gambit on your problem slide could be 500 billion people are losing X amount of money. And so that's a statement about the problem. And then you go into why. And then you can say as your solution slide, and we're helping them by doing X. And then you've got the solution. And so your titles of all of your slides could just be the key points of your story. And then you're just going through with that storytelling piece. And if an investor then drops all these pieces of paper and picks them up, they can thread together those title slides and they get the whole story beginning to end. And then you're just really using the titles to your advantage. We appreciate that, like, this is all very well and good if you have an investor and they want to hear you pitch. But a lot of the time an investor might just say, let's just meet for a chat. Let's meet for a coffee, just an informal chat, or maybe you bump into them at an event and it's not an actual opportunity for you to pitch. But you want to start building trust with them and you want to get the conversation moving to either a pitch or to booking in a follow-up conversation where you can pitch. So outside of the startup pitch or the story arc for your business, you should be able to tell your founder story in a really compelling way. And then from that conversation that you're having, you should be able to weave in a lot more about what your business is doing in a way that doesn't seem really salesy. So if you're just talking to an investor, you haven't got a pitch deck, this isn't the right time, you should be able to say why you care so much about the problem that you're solving. And the reason why you want to be able to articulate that is because an investor is assessing how you see the world. They just want to understand who you are, how you think, what's important to you. And so if you can articulate why you care about the problem, they'll start understanding that. Then you can talk about how you got to the place that you are now. So did you encounter this problem in your previous work? Or did you just have a job and then you encountered this problem and you left because you really want to solve it? Did you do UX design before and now you're starting a new business, but the UX design is really helpful because it helps you understand in a different way? They basically just want to understand who you are and what your background is and how it makes sense that you're the right fit to do this business. And then what makes you so special, which obviously don't say what makes me special is, because it might be a bit weird, but an investor wants to understand how you feel about yourself and who you are, because you need to be, investors want to get to know you and your personality. And so you want to communicate to them that you've got the right skills, but you also maybe know your blind spots. And it's just about that personality match. So if you start speaking to an investor or you just bump into someone, I think the most important thing is just to communicate the problem that you're solving and why you care so much about it. And then they might ask you follow-up questions. And then that's the way to get from the founder story into the business. If you started talking about this massive problem that you're solving and why it's so important to you, the natural follow-up question is, so what are you doing about it? And then you can then talk about your business and the solution and how you're approaching that. So just remember that people won't remember what you actually said or what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And a lot of investors will walk away feeling excited when they see a pitch being told in a really exciting way. So again, with Farhan, not to keep drilling in on him, but if I would have heard Farhan's pitch that he delivered when he was actually just introducing himself on Tuesday morning, I would have been so excited for a follow-up meeting with him. And that's because he told a really compelling story. He put a load of traction into there. So I was like, oh God, he's really onto something. He's growing really fast. He's a great personality to work with. I just want to get to know him more. And I would have just left feeling excited and wanting to spend more time with him and feel that he understands what he's talking about. And I feel like I'm informed about the market. So when you're going through the deck and the storytelling and what all the takeaways should be, just remember how you want to make the investor feel. You want to make them feel excited. You want to make them feel like they want to spend more time with you. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are a bunch of references on this. So if you want to read more about the art of storytelling, how to build a narrative arc, how to tell your startup story in a powerful pitch deck, there are so many examples online, but these are the ones that I used to put this deck together. So that's it. Any questions? I'm going to take myself off screen share and me and Em are happy to take them.
Max, did you have your hand raised from before, or do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I had it raised from volunteering to pitch.
Oh, no worries. I'm actually just going to stop.
Perfect. One of the questions